Oh, okay. So I guess Melis is the de facto host.
Yeah. Okay, well, welcome back to Forms. It has been a month or two hiatus, but we're back, better than ever. Um,
Yeah.
so, I had a topic that just popped into my mind 5 minutes ago, which is crime. It's a big topic in the news right now. There's been a national supposed spike in crime, at least in murders in most major cities, but also some types of property crime and violent crime. And this trend is, pretty well publicized. It's been going on since, I guess, the depths of the pandemic last year, but it doesn't seem to be letting up despite the reopening. And I just moved to a high crime city. Well, I guess I moved from a high crime city to a different high crime city.
Well done.
Now I live in Chicago, where crime has always been a big issue and continues to be a pretty heated topic for debate among the residents here. I downloaded this very interesting app called Citizen, um,
I think I've
which is
heard of that
available.
before.
Yeah, it's in most major cities, but it is like it's a little map that shows you like crime around you and other weird incidents going on. I actually downloaded it because over the 4th of July, I was walking with my parents, like in downtown Chicago, in like the most touristy area where the Bean is, and there was like a huge street fight going on where like the police had like blocked off like a block of downtown right next to the tourist spot, the Millennium Park area, and a bunch of like young people had just congregated there and were like throwing pop rocks on the street and like jumping on cars and stuff. Um, and that kind of disorder, and of course, then the more gruesome stuff like murders and carjackings and everything. That's been like
And then there's the
very,
murders.
yeah, but it's all like I think a lot of people here think it's symptomatic of like the societal disorder that's come into place since the pandemic started, where people are just um, I don't know, more violent, more confrontational. Even it even comes up in like the way people drive. Right, there's been a lot of discussion about how driving has become worse since the pandemic, and people feel emboldened to be assholes on the road. Um, yeah, so rambling a little bit, but I'm curious, what you think about, the safety of your city and neighborhood, whether you've noticed any, increase in disorder or if crime has become a more relevant topic to you. It sounds like none of us have been victims of crime, which is great, but um, I'm curious to hear your perspectives on it.
Well, I can, from on my end, I personally feel pretty safe in this neighborhood. Although, I guess it, in the wake of the pandemic, I think I mentioned this before, maybe, but my folks bought their first gun because they're worried things are gonna go to shit, and they never did go to shit, but now we have a gun.
Okay, that's fascinating. That's
Yeah,
I thought I was worried none of
Wait,
us would
they
have
bought one
intimacy.
recently, or they've had it for a while?
like in like
Oh, okay.
June-ish. Yeah,
Like last month or last year?
last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess for me personally, like, now that we had a weapon, there was a lot of fascination with it for a while. We're like, oh, what other like attachments can we buy? What about the bullets? When are we gonna practice this stuff, right? So we've gone to the shooting range and stuff as a
Oh.
result. And I guess I'll just say that for me personally, we bought a handgun. I don't like shooting that thing. Like, I thought it would be fun to hit targets, but first of all, I am very inaccurate. Like, any of those hostage situations where, like, the guy's like, "Oh, don't move, or else I'll kill this guy," right? You don't
Yeah.
want me to be the sniper. I will hit the hostage 100% of the time. Like, it's not even because I'm nervous. I just like I pull the trigger, boom, the bullet just goes somewhere. It's like, yeah. So yeah, if I'm pointing a gun in any direction, you do not want to be on the same side of me. You want to be on the other side. But yeah, like it just operating the weapon, it just feels violent. Like,
Mm.
you know, it's like, sure, I'm at a shooting range. There's no blood or anything. Like, I'm not actually hitting anything. In fact, I'm missing the target. But just like the whole operation is very loud and violent and unpleasant. I thought I would enjoy the experience much more. I suspect it might be a better experience with a long gun rather than like a handgun. But that's just a theory. I haven't gone back to try it out again. Yeah, but
you could say that the handgun is like objectively for self-defense, right? That's what it's designed for. But the long gun is like for
Is
the
that more
craft,
recreational? Or?
art,
which is
marksmanship.
weird because I feel like the long gun both has more killing power and is better for self-defense almost. But
Yeah.
most of the regulations out in California are surrounding the handguns.
Yeah, because the long gun's for killing a deer or something, and the handgun's for killing a person.
What, you can kill a person with a long gun too?
Yeah, but it's just like, the person
Is it harder to
is
use?
gonna
I'm not familiar enough
fight
with
back unlike the deer, so
weapons,
it's
but-
what's
I'm sorry, what was that, Justin?
Oh, I was just saying, I mean, the person will fight back, so you need a more versatile weapon, right?
Okay.
Smaller and more maneuverable, I assume. I don't know. I don't actually know anything about guns. So.
Me neither.
I-
That's
we're
what I
trying
was
to-
assuming too. I don't know. I feel like it's quicker, just boom. I
Yeah.
don't know, but
But anyway, I'm curious as to the motivations behind this purchase, right? Like, was it more like, oh, the cool aesthetic and like potential recreational value of having a gun?
No, it was for self-defense,
self-
100%. The backdrop at the time was, I forget if I might be making this up, but I seem to recall at the time there was all this looting going on, like in Seattle or whatever, and like
Yeah.
even closer to our neighborhood, like the police closed off the highway just to make make it difficult for random people to kind of just show up and like start smashing things. So like, folks got scared. And in fact, I was at the dentist the other day and while they were working on my teeth, they're like, oh yeah, you remember, and they were talking to each other, the dentist and the nurse, and it was like, you remember back in like some yada yada month, like it was crazy. They blocked up the highway, like my cousin's house got smashed, da da da. And he looks down at me, he's like, you remember that, right? I'm like, no, I don't have a super strong recollection. I was, because again, I wasn't personally affected, nor was anyone I knew personally affected, right? But it was kind of like, if you paid attention to that stuff, and again, you can tell I didn't. If you paid attention to that, I was like, that could happen to me, right? And if that were to happen to me, what do I do, right? Like, there's a bit of argument between my folks. Like, my mom was much less inclined to buy the weapon. And my dad was like, I want to have the option, right? I probably, if they're going to come rob me, I'll probably let them just take the stuff. But if they want more than to just rob me, I don't want to be helpless, right?
I think,
that was his thinking.
It's like actually really difficult to defend yourself with a gun, right? You kind of have to.
Oh no, that's
the criminal always has the element of surprise, so they usually win.
No. I agree with you on the element of surprise being important, but there was this crazy like camera recording I saw. I think it was in Chicago actually. There's this couple who opened up like a kind of like a convenience store sort of thing. They just sold shit, right? And it was like just out like in the middle of the city, like on one of those like blocks. And they had a security camera installed, right? And they were like asleep at night, right? And then you see like 3 guys like just like trespassing, right? And the camera catches them, alerts them, and the wife just like, oh, okay. It's like she practiced this before. Like she takes like a freaking shotgun, just walks into the garage, just takes one down immediately, and the other like, what the fuck? It just ends 2 of them, and the third one like runs away. It's just like they were clearly not armed, right? Like well, they might have been armed, but they never got a chance to really fight back because of the element of surprise, right? But she just came in, no hesitation, like it's almost like, yeah, I'm ready for this. You guys, okay, yeah.
That's right. I feel like being a convenience store owner is you have to own a gun if you're a convenience store owner.
Well, so
a gas station clerk or something.
Well, it's the same principle though, right? It's kind of like same with like your home, right? Like I think it pays to be ready. Like what was that phrase Gandhi used? Having a weapon is very different from using it, right? Like I don't have to use it to like attack people, but like I want to be ready,
So I'm curious, like you live in like the suburbs in the Bay Area, right?
Yeah,
Is that an
that's
accurate description? So
yeah.
like your parents, I get that like the media hype was and the coverage around the riots and everything was very, was front and center in July of 2020. What do your parents actually think the risk is of your household being a target for criminals?
Look, I did try to pose the question a couple times. The general, like my mom was just like, I don't know. I wouldn't know what to do. It's like, I was like, that's kind of not answering the question. But my dad is like, I don't know what the risk is, but it can happen. And now I'm worried about it. So I'm gonna go do something about it. Right? It's like, because on the flip side, you could ask the reverse question, say, well, what's the downside to owning a weapon? I know there are tragedies where like young children get a hold of it and like off someone in the household, right? But everyone living here is old enough to know not to do that. So like
Hopefully.
realistically, like what bad could come of this, right? On the
Yeah.
off chance that there was a situation where this need would have been helpful, like now we have it, right?
Well, yeah, I just, it's not such an American thing to say. I don't know, like in most countries you would say like the idea of needing a gun to defend your household would not be a topic of conversation.
Oh
right?
yeah, 100%, 100%. And
I mean, like I agree with you. Like there's not really a downside besides the money you spend on it. But it's also, as you were alluding to earlier, like just a violent thing. It's like a symbol of violence, right? And it's kind of like it exists in your house now, and you look at it and you're like, wow, I live in like a country where I can't be expected to be
I
safe.
don't have such a psychological burden, man. It's just like going to the bathroom. It's just something you do. I'm not proud of it,
Yeah,
but
I do
it's a
think that
thing, right?
Like varies from person to person. I mean,
it's
some
not
people
like
are very
we
sensitive.
it's not like we have the handgun just like sitting on the dining table every day, and it's like
you all got a special little case.
right? Like it's usually out of sight, out of mind most of the day. I just go about doing my business, right? It's just
I know, like some people are very sensitive to the imagery of guns. That's why they changed the gun emoji to like a water spray thing. I don't know, but like I don't know. I just think about like my relative, like I lived in Australia, for instance. There would be no presumption that you need a gun to just in case, right? Because you live in like a functioning society or developed society where the police, there's not really that much crime and the police are competent and 911 is available. I don't know. It's odd. It like kind of it's just assumes that there's this background of crime that is always looming.
I guess.
Yeah, but that's gonna vary by area, like depending on where you live, right?
Right.
I feel like there's definitely gonna be more violent areas where I think it's completely justified. Where it's like, wait, you don't have a gun in your house? Yeah.
But I don't know. I feel like this attitude is like kind of spread to everywhere in America.
Oh, okay. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, like people just, I mean, and you can see it reflected in gun sales and this like national perception that crime is a huge problem. I think people everywhere are starting to feel unsafe, even in the suburbs, even in traditionally safe areas, right? Just kind of like paranoia about it.
Well, I mean, moving away from the specific case of violent crime, like someone like comes in like an armed robbery, right? Like I do hear a lot around this neighborhood I'm living in. There's like small petty crime. And one thing that's been pissing a lot of people off is they have a policy out, maybe just in my county, but maybe for California at large. It's if the crime, the damages resulting from the crime are less than, say, was it $900 or $9,000? Basically, the police aren't even going to like look at it. Like they just be like, "There's too much of this shit. We're not paid enough."
There's just that much crime where they can't even.
They're just like,
I think
we
that's
don't
a
have
thing
time.
everywhere. Yeah.
Right. Like
Okay.
it's fine. Like just are you hurt? Okay, great. Then we're not even gonna like look at it, try to find out who did it, because there's just so much of it, right? I mean, I can kind of see that, right? But it's also a hard pill to swallow as a citizen. It's like basically if they do some like nasty things to me, right? Like you don't care because you're like, I don't have time. It's like, on the whole, it might make sense because it's kind of like, well, if you want them to cover everything, you probably have to pay more taxes. But then we get into the whole thing about where are my tax dollars going, right? Why am I not being protected when I pay this much California tax every year, right? You know, so that's a whole different can of worms. But it's like this sort of stuff seems to be going on.
Yeah.
I've never personally felt unsafe, but maybe that's just me being ignorant, right? Like in reality, if someone were to just show up at my door today with a gun and he just wanted to kill me because of the way I look or whatever, like I don't presume to know why they do the things that they do, right? But if they showed up, I'm a little better defended now than I was maybe 2 years ago. And you
Hopefully
know,
your dad pulls up with a handgun.
yeah,
Because
and
I'm pretty
so-
sure if you pull it out, you're gonna miss.
yeah, so that's the thing, right? We were talking about this. It's kind of like, well, if we're actually serious about the home defense thing, honestly, we are all going to the shooting range, right? We should have more weapons and a variety of weapons so that we can like tag team. So like we have a second floor, right? You got a guy comes out from a second floor suppressing fire. The guy takes cover. The next guy comes out with a shotgun, turns the corner.
I have the high ground, Anakin.
Yeah, exactly, right? So it's, yeah. I mean, there comes a point where it starts getting ridiculous, right? And we're not anywhere near that yet, but it's, I mean, I do see your point, Justin. Like in many countries, folks tend to rely more on law enforcement for safety. There's no mental need for firearms specifically for
Right.
self-defense.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's interesting because I mean, I do think America is objectively more dangerous than some of these developed countries in Europe and whatever. So, you know, there's a rational piece to it, but then there's also like a hyperbolic sort of element where people like, you know, the media plays up all this crime and then suddenly people think it's dangerous to come anywhere near like downtown Chicago, for example, or Atlanta is probably the same. You know, people probably have some perception about going into the city and, you know,
I
being
think in
exposed to it.
principle, this arms situation is very much the same as we face in terms of nuclear weapons. It's kind of like it would be better for everyone if we just didn't have weapons laying around and we had a law enforcement that like actually kept the order, right? But given the current state of affairs, if I were to just stop holding a weapon, I can't prevent anyone else from holding a weapon. So like I'm just worse off, right?
Yeah,
Why would
right,
I do
right.
that, right?
Yeah, I
You
totally
know?
get it. I totally
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, and that's definitely the sentiment my dad held regarding the gun. It's like, I don't want to have a weapon around. Like he probably closer to your thinking is kind of like, it feels bad, right? Like, why the hell do I have to worry about this? But
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
it is what it is. And it reminds me, actually, I heard another story about, what was it? It didn't have a gun involved, but I think it was in Canada. There was, so the dad and his kid was at home, and then some guy just showed up and had a baseball bat and just went after the kid and like unloaded on him or something with the baseball bat. And so the dad just ended up killing the attacker. Like he ended up killing, I forget if it was a gun or some other way, but the attacker died. And now the dad's in prison for murder. And I'm just like,
wait, what?
Exactly.
I don't know how laws work, so I don't.
Well, so
Yeah,
it's like I'm not talking so much about laws. Like I'm assuming that the sentence was given out in accordance with the law, right? But it's just kind of like I'd like to think of things through like an economic lens, right? In terms of incentives, right? So if the law is when some guy is like basically trying to beat your kid to death, and the law is like if you know, in trying to protect your kid were to kill the attacker, you will be punished. I just feel like it's kind of a dumb law from an incentives point of view, because
that sounds very dumb.
because it seems like, you know, I don't think that is going to deter most parents anyways. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, sure, you'll put me in jail, but we'll deal with that when we we'll cross that bridge when we get there, right? It's kind of like right now you are literally beating my
Yeah,
kid
your
to death.
instincts. So you're gonna protect your
Yeah,
kid,
so
right?
so so that's why I was saying like this law seems kind of dumb in that sense, right? It's just kind of like
For sure.
you're creating a law that people are incentivized to disobey almost, right? Like that's kind of what I'm saying. So I mean,
That's really odd. That's not the same. I feel like I've heard cases here where like that doesn't happen, right? Is it self defense? Oh yeah, I'm not familiar enough with the law, but I feel
I
like
think
if
on
something
most-
happens in self defense, like you're
In
not
many
gonna get
states, yeah.
charged for
I assume
it, yeah.
Canadian law isn't quite set up the same way to
Okay.
like provide those carve outs or exceptions.
Okay.
Guessing it's technicality.
yeah, because I guess strictly speaking, it's not self-defense. You are defending someone else,
Right.
right? And
Yeah.
I watched a video, some guy trying to explain what the legal boundaries are in America, at least. It's something about like, and this is probably what it came down to, right? And I'm just trying to fill in gaps here. It's like if you see, so for example, just going to use a hypothetical example with three of us, right? So say I came after Justin, right? And I was like going for his life, right? And Justin was unable to defend himself. Mellis over there was like, shit, this crazy motherfucker is going to murder my friend. I need to save him. I think that the phrase they used was, you are entitled to use as much force as the attacker is using to defend your friend.
As much
Right.
force as necessary. Yeah.
Not as much force as necessary. It's the same amount of force. So like if the guy attacking, if I had a gun, I was going after Justin, and Mela somehow had access to a gun, he can take the gun and attack me. So if we put it back into the Canadian example, perhaps what happened was the guy came in with a baseball bat, but the dad didn't have a baseball bat. He had a shotgun. So he just shot the guy. And then the court might have been like, well, you didn't have to shoot the guy. If you had a baseball bat and you knocked him out, you probably could have saved your kid too. This is unnecessary use of force. Because they did unnecessary use of force.
That's what I was saying
need to go to
about.
jail.
I'm guessing it was a very literal application of the law, right? Like,
Right,
they don't
so-
have those exceptions that some American states do for stand your ground or defending the lives. of
Yeah. So
because I assume in Canada it doesn't happen as much as it does here, right?
I mean, there's some crazy things that happen up there. I got a friend who's a teacher up there now. He told me about some guy who, I forget if it had anything to do with Uber, but basically he just like drove his car around and he just stops at random places and like just shot people. And he just like he just, it was like hit and run. Just,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
GTA just went around and just eventually he got taken out by cops. But like it's just, I mean, that shit happens everywhere.
It does. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's odd. Mellis, I'm curious to hear about your perception from Atlanta.
I actually just remembered a crime did happen to me before. When
You
I-
just
when I-
remembered.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't anything that was like really bad, or I wasn't even technically there. But when I was younger, our house did get robbed. And so how old was I? I think I was in middle school. I think my mom had gone to Ethiopia, and so me and my sister were staying like with our cousins. So no one was at our house. I think we had people that would like kind of check in sometimes just to check in on everything, make sure it's okay. But yeah, I think we got a call from like the police one day, and then they let us know that there was a break-in at our house. And I think what had they taken? Well, one thing that they had taken that really upset me was they took my GameCube and like all of my games.
That is cool. Wow.
So obviously, I think it was like probably a youngish person that probably broke in. I don't know who just steals a GameCube. Like I think this was at the time when I'm pretty sure maybe the PS3 was already out. Who takes a GameCube?
It's actually kind of crazy. One of my coworkers told me almost the exact same story.
Really?
Except he wasn't like far away. Like
Okay.
his folks were just at work and he was at school and he came back and like all
It
of
was
his
broken into.
like what I think was it Nintendo 64, not a GameCube.
Oh,
Just
his
got
was a
taken.
64. Oh,
Right. So, but the crazy part is the second part of the story because they're like, oh well, they robbed us. Can't do anything about that now. I guess we just go on with life. And so they bought some of the stuff and replaced it. And the next week they
Yeah.
came back, and so then it was gone again.
no
They
way.
robbed them again, and it took basically the
What?
same stuff.
What?
And they were just
Someone's
like,
watching
that's
them.
it.
Wow.
That's it. We need to
Oh
move.
my god.
Like, what is
yeah.
this?
Or what?
So,
Oh,
so
that's
and he didn't have enough money to get a third replacement, right? So it was like,
obviously it would just get stolen again.
right? It's just,
Yeah,
this
that's
is crazy.
that's when
And they
you
would,
that's when you get a broken one and you leave it there, and then when they steal it, you leave a note and it says
and
not just on
he
you.
said something about like they came in through the same way. There was like this opening on their roof, like
Yeah.
it's just part of their house design. Like there's a way you can get in that way. They came in that way the first time. They came in
Oh
that way the
my
second time. And they're
God.
just
That
like,
is
what?
just
So it's
Wow.
like, yeah, I mean, in this case, a gun would not have helped you, but it's just kind of like,
No.
again, I guess I should feel fortunate that none of this has ever happened to me personally, but it's
yeah,
just
right.
hearing this is kind of crazy.
Yeah, and
So wait,
the
what
way
else
they
did
came
they-
in, so we had this porch, and this was back at our previous house, so the one
Hmm.
before we lived at now. And so we had this like kind of porch in the back. And so what we think happened is that, so we found that my sister's bedroom is like, she has a window that's like right above that porch, and her window was broken. So we believe that they like climbed onto that porch, because the porch has these stairs that go down into the backyard. So what we think happened is that they went up the stairs, climbed onto the porch, broke her window, and then just went in from there. I think we had a guest room also. I think we had a family friend that had some stuff there, and some of their stuff got stolen. I think they actually had some jewelry there that got stolen. And that person moved all their stuff out after that incident.
So how did your parents or family like respond to this? or react?
we talked to the police about it, but I mean, I didn't do anything. I guess I didn't care about.
Wasn't
some-
worth
course.
enough, Mellis.
Yeah, I guess
$9,000.
I didn't hit the threshold. But I don't know. I don't remember how I felt. I think I might have been like a little upset because that was my main source of entertainment, and it was gone.
I mean, yeah.
I guess we were feeling a little like unsafe. Our house had just been broken into. I think I feel like it bothered my sister more. I feel like I usually don't get fazed by things. I was just like, all right, whatever. But I kind of had this feeling like, oh, this can never happen. I feel like no one ever thinks that they'll get robbed until like it happens. I'm like, oh, okay, so this is a thing. This actually.
Yeah, I
happens
am
to
a
people.
person too. I can be
Yeah,
robbed.
I can get robbed too.
So did you guys get like a security system? I know you moved. Was that like an influence?
I think
move?
oh no, the move had nothing to do with that. But I think we did get I think we did get a security system after that. And then we definitely got one when we moved to this new place. So yeah, that kind of taught us, okay, we need to have better security.
Right. Do you
and
actually
unfortunately,
use
my-
the security system?
Huh?
Do you
What does
actually
yours
use
do?
the system?
Yes. Yeah, we usually turn it on when we leave the house, and then that's basically it.
So
Like
what does it
ATT
do?
or something?
No, so if someone tries to, get into the house while the system is on, then some alarms will go off, and then it sends a notification to 911.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
So
probably
we don't
the
have
cops
any
might show
security
up in half an
cameras or
hour.
anything. I don't know how long, but
Yeah, it's funny because I mean I did a project relating to like home security a
Yeah.
while back, and I was just thinking like these products, like they call it a security system, but like what does it actually
it's just
secure?
it's a notification system.
Exactly.
That's it.
It's like you get a push notification. You are being robbed. right? It's like, I mean, if you can scare them away, I guess. But
Yeah,
like,
I think that's
eh,
part of it.
Yeah.
And I feel like my mom had asked, like pretty maybe within the past couple years, she was like, hey, we should get like security cameras because I think one of our neighbors was like telling her about it. Oh, they like I think just got some like off of Amazon, just like installed it and downloaded the app. And I was like, oh, maybe you can do that, but never bothered.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like our current neighborhood is pretty safe. I've heard of a few people like being robbed before, but that's it. Um, have heard of some violent crimes and like not in my neighborhood, but like closer to like there's this area in East Atlanta called Clarkston. That's usually where a lot of crimes will happen. So there's been some violent crimes that would happen over there. But I don't know. I feel Atlanta is like pretty. Oh, it depends on what part are you in. I think the general idea is like if you go closer to like, I think like the West, there's parts of like West Atlanta, especially like downtown West Atlanta or South Atlanta that feel like there's more crime in those areas. So that's a general idea.
When you, Mellis, when you bring up this whole idea, it depends on what area you go to. I can't help but think back to a previous episode where we're talking a lot about what was the word, Justin, you used, gentrification or like
that is a word I use. Segregation.
Like, what's that?
Segregation.
I think it was gentrification, probably.
Yeah, I forget, but I think the concept was how like folks don't want to mix like neighborhoods. They want to kind of stay separate.
Yeah, that's segregation, right?
Okay.
Gentrification is where a neighborhood transforms from low to high income.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, okay. So it's like a positive.
But segregation can be a result of gentrification, though, right?
Well, yeah, they're related terms, right? Like,
yeah,
American cities are segregated, but gentrification is where the pattern of segregation changes, right? Like neighborhoods will flip from being predominantly one race to another, income class to another.
Right, and I guess what I'm saying here is, suppose I lived in a neighborhood that I considered safe, right? And then, Justin comes and like suggests that we should, kind of all just consider ourselves one city and kind of like mix and kind of live together. I mean, I personally, if I had this belief that I lived in like a really safe part of town and then a lot of other parts of town were unsafe, that would not be very popular with me, right? And I'm just thinking like, with that in mind, I think this is a reasonable way to interpret how some folks believe kind of out in the world. It's like maybe that's a contributing factor to why they don't want to maybe kind of go on with the whole kind of like get together sort of mentality.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I think the perception of safety is a huge like factor in segregation and how cities divide up amongst different groups of people. I mean, I moved to Chicago. I chose a very safe neighborhood quite intentionally, and it's even reflected in rent and housing prices. Right, people prioritize safety, and if the safer it is, the more expensive it is. Right. Yeah, and I don't blame anyone for prioritizing that individual sort of need above like, ooh, we need to be like buddies and have a cohesive society where we're all friendly to each other. Like that's great, but at the end of the day, I don't want to get robbed. So that's kind of like the first goal, right? Yeah, no, totally.
Okay.
I think it's a huge factor.
Yeah, so it's almost like, if we just look at the issue in and of itself, how like folks kind of separate themselves out, it's kind of like, why can't we all be friends? It's kind of like, yeah, that doesn't sound, it sounds like it's a problem we want to fix, but then when we consider the alternative and we actually try to implement it, it's kind of like, actually, I'd imagine, right, if I was like in an act of like divine intervention, like I just went to Chicago, like changed everyone's house ownerships. You just randomly get assigned a house in the city, right? Like you don't own your house anymore, it's mine, and I redistribute to people. Like I feel like, yes, you would be mixed, but like within 3 days, people will be like jumping out of their house, like, no, I want to move. Let me find my old neighbors.
I mean, it's interesting though, because like
neighborhood. It's like
there's like
a
a
natural tendency to separate, I guess. I feel like
there is, but I also think like crime like doesn't happen in a vacuum, right? There are like agglomeration effects to crime, right? Like you put a bunch of like desperate people in one small area, you're likely to multiply the amount of crime that would happen if those people were distributed randomly across the city. Like there are crime networks and gangs, right, with territories, and it all depends on like concentrating poverty and, you know, a low standard of living in one place. So I don't know if it would, if you did what you were suggesting, had this thought experiment of just distributing everyone randomly.
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know if it would be the same level of crime would happen. I kind of doubt it.
What I'm saying is the random distribution that I just somehow managed to pull off, I just don't think it's stable, because there are people who just cannot accept the fact that their neighbor might be someone who does robbing for a living, and they just naturally kind of separate out again, is what I'm saying, right? Like when we're in a situation, like I just don't feel like the mixing just in and of itself is going to result in a stable state of affairs, is kind of what I'm pointing out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think a lot of, this is a hot take, but I think a lot of like liberal people kind of underestimate how like bad crime is. I don't know how like gross it is to be a victim of crime and how little people have a tolerance for it. I mean, I think this is a big thing in immigrant communities, right? Like I've heard plenty of, you know, immigrant like narratives, and, you know, people I've met who are from other countries who come here, and, you know, when they immigrate to the United States, they want to get away from crime, right? Like it's not acceptable for them to live in a high crime area. So even like if you're like a minority and you suddenly have a higher income, can afford to move out of a shitty neighborhood, you will absolutely do that, right? Like all of those other things about community and like mixing of the classes and the races is all secondary, right? Like if you live in some ghetto and you suddenly have more income, you're going to move somewhere safer, right? Because crime is terrible. I don't know. I just like, I have this very strong view that like, and this is funny because I've never been a victim of it, but I just like crime is a horrible thing, right? And that sounds kind of obvious.
Oh, it sounds pretty good, man.
Like people, I don't know. It's like people
hot
like,
take, crime is bad.
It'd be a once in a lifetime experience.
I feel like it gets lost in like this entire like defund the police thing and all of that that's going on right now. Is that, you know, people have such a low tolerance for crime that even if there's like a slight increase in the crime rate, there's a very strong backlash where people are going to want more police. They're going to want more like of a security state. And we're seeing it happen, right? Like there's been this recent increase in crime, and public opinion has like shifted radically, right? Like this is now like the #1 issue in politics. People are demanding more, you know, cops on the street. Like the recent mayoral election in New York City, right? Eric Adams, who was a former cop, won the election.
Former cop.
On a platform that, and his platform was like literally straight up like, we are not going to defund the police. We're going to have more police. You know, cops are good and crime is really bad, right? And he won votes.
Dude, I love this guy. Such a simple message. Cop good,
and
crime
people hate him. Like a lot of like people online and leftists like really dislike it because he's like anti-defund the police. But he won based on like getting votes in like the lowest income, you know, highest minority neighborhoods, right? The heavily Black and Hispanic neighborhoods in the Bronx and everything, where people are experiencing this crime in real time, this increase in crime, and they're like, well, fuck that, you know,
they want to be
more
safe.
cops on my block.
Yeah.
Like, let's get these criminals off the street, right? And
it's like at least cops follow some rules. Criminals don't follow any rules.
I think like everyone knows that like the cops, the police in America are fucked up and they're abusive and they're not accountable. But you know, I read this interesting article, actually from like a civil rights kind of like a writer, like a lefty sort of guy, right? But he was like basically saying, you know, yeah, like we know the cops are bad, but also when they actually come and like help you out when you're a victim, right? If someone's broken into your house and they come and try and find the criminal, or they arrest someone, like that's great.
Yeah.
You know, like you want that.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I think, you know, crime is bad.
Yeah,
it's
yo,
good to recognize-
Justin for president.
Like,
Justin 2025. Or is it
all of
2020?
I guess what I'm getting at is all of our goals about like creating a more cohesive society, less stratification by class and race. Those goals will not be achieved if people don't feel safe, right? Because they're always going to put safety first.
Yeah.
There's crime and it's bad and hurting people, then there's going to be more cops, and people are going to buy guns even if they live in the suburbs, and they're going to be afraid of their neighbors, and we're not going to get there.
Yeah.
So we want to like a tolerant society. Ironically, we need to like crack down quite hard on crime, especially violence.
You're starting to sound like a Chinese bureaucrat. Because that's the shit they say all day. It's, this is for your own good. This is for your safety. That's
Well,
why
it needs to be
we're
like democratic, right? We need to have like communities being, you know, people.
well,
not-
once you
not,
start
like,
throwing in
leaders.
caveats, that system just doesn't work quite the same. But what I
He's
will
a
say is
politician.
the whole thing about like defunding the police, I feel like it's like if your kid like, you know, was playing with matches and ended up burning down your house, that's terrible. But you don't end the kid. Like you try to teach the kid not to do that. Like, you know,
Right.
you be a
yeah.
better person, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like with the police it's the same thing. Like if they do something bad, like that doesn't mean we just ignore it. But at the same time, the institution, the idea of a law enforcement, that's not the issue. The issue is the
for
specific
sure.
conduct,
Yeah.
right?
I can see where like defund the police people are coming from, because like you
I
look at some
honestly
of the-
don't. Can you
I mean, I
explain a
don't know.
bit?
I don't know the specifics. Is it literally
Yeah.
just, oh, they need less money? Because I don't know how that.
So the idea is that like this traditional model of public safety in America is broken. You know, we put tons of money into the cops. We buy them the latest equipment and, you know, SWAT vehicles and whatever. But we haven't seen like the impact on crime that we expect in proportion. The idea is that, you know, a lot of like this crime would be better addressed if we put more money into social services and have like, you know, more counseling available.
So
mental
it's more
health.
reallocating money, not, oh, let's just take away money from this.
Yeah, it's a terrible slogan because everybody
Yeah,
thinks,
that's-
oh, we're just gonna like cut the police.
Yeah,
budget.
if you're saying reallocating, I can see how that could like.
But like my
Yeah.
qualm
Work
with
out
this
better.
is if the police force with this much money is already so ineffective in these people's eyes, what makes you think they'll be more effective or even as effective if you take away all their money?
Right. I think, yeah, the counter argument, which I generally agree with, is like you want like being a cop to be like a noble profession, right? And I think like part of the reason why cops in America are so corrupt is because it's not a very noble profession, right? Like not many people want to be police or go
Yeah.
into the police force. They're looked down upon, they're not paid. Okay, well, the pay varies by place to place, but they're not always paid very well. They are not held to high standards, right? Not high educational standards or training standards. So you want like a cop to be, you know, respected profession that like well-meaning people go into, not desperate people. But to do that, you need to put more money into it, right? To train them and to bring them
That's
up
a
to that
good
higher
point.
level, right?
I know.
I mean, is there really more? Oh, okay. Well, wait. Are you saying that they actually? I don't think it's I don't think it's a matter of they need more money, but I don't know, better operation, right?
Right. Well, yeah,
Or
it's
management.
it's like I think it's a whole cultural like tangle of a mess, right?
Right.
That's
But you need
like
to
a
fix the
different-
culture, and I think, you know, you think about like jobs satisfaction, right? Like what kind of jobs are people like happy in? Like what are attractive jobs? They're ones that are not only compensated well, but there's like a high standard for behavior and it's like positively viewed by people in society. And you need to create that sort of culture around police, right? And there's like no easy way to do that. I think for some
Oh yeah,
police
because I mean,
departments,
it's
thinking
that
about
hard
that.
because people want to feel safe, but isn't a police officer job something where like you're potentially not going to be safe, right? So isn't there always going to be an aversion to it?
well, I don't know. I mean, like
Well, I
I think
was
there are
about to say
examples of
that-
like reforms or like police forces in other countries where they've achieved this. But yeah, it's difficult because in America we created I don't know, we have police forces that are deeply embedded and they've been around for a long time and they have a lot of power. It's not easy to like crack that. You know, I don't really
was
have the answer
thinking
to
that,
this.
you know, like is the military has programs where it's kind of like I'll pay for you to go to college and then you come serve for like a few years, right? Like that's a
Yeah.
thing, right? I'm
Yeah.
not making
Yeah.
this up.
This
Why
is
can't we
true.
do that with the police?
I mean, we could. Maybe that's a good idea, right?
Right? Because
Oh, yeah.
it's kind of like, and I guess I have the impression, I've not met many people who've served in the military before, but I have the impression that folks coming out of the military, whichever branch that they might be serving in, they're generally well behaved and upstanding citizens.
Yeah, but the military is like accountable, right?
And also, I think
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know the specifics, but I mean, I have friends that have been in the military, but they're like in the reserves, and they've gotten money from school, so they don't actually, since they're in the reserves, they don't actually go to the anywhere where they're not in danger at all.
Right. Most,
Sure.
yeah, vast majority.
Whereas, you know, if you're gonna work as a police officer, then potentially you're gonna be. I mean,
Right.
I don't know. I guess it depends on what you're doing or where you get placed or what.
I mean, we can be selective about like who deserves the financial support, right? Like how much are you committing to serve as a police officer? Like actually not just like be doing a desk job in the department or something like that. That could be dangerous too, but like those are details that I guess are not super important for this idea, right? It's
Right,
kind of
right.
like, you know, it's like if we're complaining that, you know, it's like I don't know how prestigious or honorable it is to serve in the military in the abstract. I think maybe it has a slightly better reputation than serving as police officers. I don't know.
I
I'm
definitely think
kind
it does, yeah.
I think it has better benefits.
yeah, like just
Yeah.
in general, right? It's like a
Yeah.
better sort of thing, but it's just kind of like in principle, these are very similar folks, right? Like soldiers protect us from foreign threats and these protect us from domestic threats,
Yeah, usually
right?
when
Like,
you see a soldier, you say, you know, thank you for protecting our country. You see a cop, maybe you just
it's like,
you
get the
just
fuck
you
away, he's
ignore
gonna,
them,
like,
or you
give
say
me a
F
speeding
you,
ticket.
you know, hey,
Yeah, fuck off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I mean, to be fair, right? Like police conduct sometimes is not the most respectable conduct, but like perhaps that's just a thing where like everyone needs to like be more serious about it, right? Like make being a police officer much more kind of a respectable role, like give
Yeah.
them benefits to like pursue a better education. So you got smarter cops, more sensible people kind of doing law enforcement, right? And you know, just it kind of go in that direction. I feel like so maybe not defund the police, but like
Yeah.
fund them a little differently.
Differently,
Right? Like,
No,
Yeah.
I agree that's it. And I
I
think
like that. Yeah, I like that idea. Kevin 2024.
1 year,
Yeah,
I get a 1 year term before Justin takes over. I say, actually, get the fuck out of here. Kevin 2024, Justin 2025.
but I do think like there have been some interesting reforms around this. But basically you kind of have to like crack open the culture of it. Like a lot of police departments are attracting, like because it's become so politically polarized, a lot of police departments are attracting like these kind of thuggish guys who like get like are really, you know, high off of the idea of like being a cop and, you know, being an asshole as a cop, right? The entire Blue Lives Matter thing, right? They're attracting like that sort of reactionary and not super like thoughtful person, right? Not the kind of person who's going into the police academy right now. I think there was like some city like Newark or somewhere in the Northeast where they literally decided to reform the police department, like just firing everyone. They like literally just fired the entire
They started from
police
scratch. Wow.
and started from scratch, and it worked. Like they improved, you know, outcomes. Like police brutality decreased. You know, they were more accountable, better, you know, received in the community. That's the kind of radical thing we need to do, right? Is we just need to take these shitty police forces and their unions and tell them to fuck off. And we need to fire thousands of shitty police officers if necessary. And that's going to take like a lot of money and a lot of effort. It's going to be extremely controversial because the police unions are very powerful in a lot of cities like New York and Los Angeles. But you know, that's kind of what we got to do, right? And that's
Change the
different than
slogan.
defunding.
Reform it.
Yeah, it's
Reform
like
it. Not
we're
defund
going
it.
to rebuild the police. Yeah, or
rebuild. Yeah.
Yeah. I think with a lot of, as with a lot of things in America, like if you create the pay incentive, you will get talented people to join
Right. Yeah.
those relevant industries. And in this case, I'm saying the police, law enforcement is almost like an industry, right? Like it's kind of like folks, a lot of smart folks. Like I feel like I'm hoping the three of us, if we were to become police officers, that we wouldn't be the abusive type and we generally conduct ourselves in a, respectable manner, right? But it's just kind of like, for me, it's kind of like, well, I don't want to be a police officer, right? And there are many reasons to do with that. Part of it has to do with, I guess, perceived compensation, for example, right? So like, if we can change that calculus and we let people self-select, right? Like, I think that just generally creates a better system.
Yeah.
But we talked a lot about like violent crime and I guess traditional crime. I think we should spend a little bit of time talking about things like white collar crime. Because I think in many ways that stuff does a lot more damage to people's lives, right? Like if you, like, if we got bankers on Wall Street who crash the market and destroy a bunch of senior citizens' life savings, like I don't think a single criminal, even like their lives could literally be ending now because they like, well, I can't work. I have all these medical bills and I have no money left, right? Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, even like a mass murderer who goes out with a gun can't reach that many people through their actions.
I don't know. I think it's interesting. There's just something so visceral about violent crime and it gets all the attention. I also don't think I've been a victim of white collar crime, and I feel like white collar crime is prosecuted better, right? Like it's if you rip off a lot of people, by engaging in a Ponzi scheme or whatever, you probably get in trouble. Because at some point, it all has to come crashing down, and then you have hundreds of people who are angry at you, and they all know who you are and your name, right? So it's kind of different than being a criminal who robs someone while wearing a ski mask, and then you can never find them. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I agree with you that it probably does a lot of material damage, maybe more, than violent crime, but
I guess it's just not as commonplace, or maybe just not as reported, I guess, because it's not catchy. Is it do you feel like it's harder to do? I feel like
I get the impression that we have pretty strong institutions in place, that sort of shit. You think about, well, I guess I mean it all happens after the fact, but it all gets prosecuted after it's happened, so that's bad. But the Wells Fargo thing where they were just opening checking accounts in people's names without their authorization, or something like that, and ripping them off.
Yeah.
That got uncovered, right? And there was a resolution to it, and people were, I think, compensated for the damages. So maybe was it enough? Probably not. But.
So you're kind of saying basically it's almost, I don't want to say solved in the sense that everything's perfect, but you're of the opinion that there's not much more we can realistically do besides go for a Minority Report sort of take on it and be like, I know you're about to commit white collar crime. Let me incarcerate you now.
Yeah, but that's not
you
constitutional.
Ruin millions of people's lives.
You can't incarcerate people for things they're about to do. Yeah, they have to do it, and then But I don't know. I mean, I think thinking back to 2008 and Wall Street and all of that shit that I don't understand that well. I'm sure there is more that can be done. The better laws and better regulations that can be in place. But it's also kind of hazy, right? A lot of what these people do isn't strictly illegal. It's shady. It's unethical, maybe. But playing with money in a dangerous way and making risky investments and approving, risky mortgages wasn't fully illegal, right? It wasn't black and white illegal.
Well, so the funny thing there is I took a class in freshman year and I had to read a lot of material surrounding this stuff. And I'm a firm believer though, that if you trace it all the way back, the reason 08 happened was because we wanted it to happen, us as people in a very convoluted way. And I'll just quickly run through the chain that was kind of described to me in those source materials was basically it started like in the 60s or 70s. There was something about the American dream where everyone needed to own a home.
Mhm.
Justin probably knows more about that piece of it than I do, but that was a very popular component of like presidential campaigns and all sorts of politics at the time. But you couldn't make it happen just by saying it, right? You needed to make policies that made home ownership more feasible. And one of those policies involved scrutinizing the banks and telling them, hey, you need to give people loans. They're like, but I don't think they're going to pay them back. No, no, no. You give them loans, right? So there was a big negotiation where the banks were like, okay, well, I can give them loans, but I need two things back from you, government. One, there was a thing like today we have big banks that have a lot of branches, right? I think back then, like branch banking was like mostly illegal. Like you only had your local bank. Like
I think I have heard about this. Yeah.
yeah, and then so the banks were like, you have to let us like consolidate. They're like, okay, fine. And two, I need you to kind of back these mortgages because I have no confidence that they'll be paid back. And everyone said, yeah, no problem, no problem. Just give the loans, damn it. I want to be elected next term. So we do that, and the banks are like, oh shit, we're making so much money, and there's like no risk because the government's gonna bail us out if everything goes to shit. Let's keep doing this. In fact, let's start making even more aggressive loans. It's like all for the home ownership, right? Like all for the American dream. Everyone's like, yeah. I want to be better than the last president. I want to show even increased home ownership rates. And the cycle continues until you get to 08, where all of a sudden they're like, oh shit. Well, it was bound to happen at some point, and the government stuck true to its word. It did bail them out, but
Yeah.
if you think about it, then like where did it all come from? It's because we wanted to own homes when we couldn't necessarily afford what was a reasonable sort of situation. So, that's my take on it.
Yeah, and nowhere in that description is anything about legality or crime, right? I mean, that's the difficulty with like white collar crime is that it's often so like vague. Like
There's a lot
look
more
at Trump.
finger pointing and a lot less
Right.
fact. Yeah.
Like look at Trump, who like objectively committed like multiple crimes throughout his career, but he hasn't been arrested or anything because it's all like buried under multiple layers of like secrecy, and the documents aren't fully there, and the tax law is so complicated that maybe you can like formulate a way that it's legal or borderline legal, right? Yeah, it's just not clear, right? But when someone sticks a gun at you and asks for your wallet, that's like,
hey, that's not okay.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe that's not the way things should be, but
kind of is just how it is.
just how it is, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, our economy is built off of like, we buy things using credit, right? Taking out loans, and we, leverage these like lines of credit. Nothing is ever like just a simple transaction anymore. And when you introduce all these layers of like abstractness to the finance system, then you're kind of creating all these opportunities for people to do like abstractly legal things with other people's money, right? I don't know. And yeah, it sometimes leads to unfortunate outcomes.
Yeah.
Like it's like crazy to me that like multi-level marketing is legal, for example, right? Or like these companies, there's like a bunch of well-known ones, right? But basically the entire concept that like, they're selling this idea to people, right? Like, oh, if you become like a salesman for our shitty like Tupperware or something, and you go out and like recruit all of your friends to do this, you sell it, then you could become like be making hundreds of thousands a year once you reach this level, right? You just need to keep selling, need to keep recruiting people. It's basically a pyramid scheme. But I think because like within the law, like because you're actually selling a product, right? It's legal. As opposed to like a true pyramid scheme where you just like put some money in.
There's not anything legit. Yeah.
There's no like actual transaction, right? But multi-level marketing is legal, and you can like literally basically lie to people and tell them they could be making like crazy amounts of money just by signing up and going out and selling knives to your friends, right? and it's legal because you're
How
actually
do
selling
you
them
go, how do
something.
you go from Tupperware to knives? That got
Well,
violent.
both of those are examples of like the companies that and the products they sell as
Gotcha.
part of
Okay,
these like
I might be missing
enterprises.
something here. What is the morally objectionable aspect about this?
Okay, so the premise of multi-level marketing is like, let's say you have like a some product, right? Like Tupperware, I think was an early example.
Okay.
There's also knives or makeup and other like cheap shit, right? The idea is like you recruit people to sell this stuff for you, right? And you tell them, you know, they'll get a cut of the profit from what they sell, right? So like, oh yeah, you know, we're gonna give you, you're gonna receive some supply of Tupperware and you're going to sell it to people you know around you, right? And you will get a cut of that money. And if you recruit more people who sell under you and become salesmen in this organization, you will get like a cut of their profit, right? So if you look at, you know, so our fancy marketing, you could become like a millionaire if you do
Okay.
this enough, right? But obviously, as the base of the pyramid grows, the slice of the pie that's available to each person theoretically diminishes, right? And eventually, you hit the brick wall of like, well, shit, you know, we've run out of people to sign up to this scheme, and it all falls
The
apart.
scheme.
And what usually happens is like a lot of people will be lured into this, think like they'll hear the testimonies and the marketing. It's like, oh yeah, you know, I got into this and now I make 100K a year and I just bought myself a truck, you know, and it's been amazing. But like these companies trap these people, and they often even charge them to buy the product they have to sell, right? They're basically extracting money. And the promise of like, you know, recruiting a bunch of people and becoming higher up in this organization never materializes, right? You just end up often in the negative, right? Because it's the organization that ends up positive, right? And the transaction between you and them. You know, you're never able to recruit enough people to become a meaningful player in the pyramid, and you're paying to sell these products essentially. So you're ending up in the negative just on the pure individual transaction.
Okay.
So it's a
I
pyramid
think
scheme,
I've
right?
heard of cases like this before.
Yeah.
Basically, it was not an arrangement made with the intent of mutual
Oh,
benefit.
absolutely not.
It
Yeah.
was clearly like for the guy who designed this arrangement, right, and was selling it to people, they were pretty sure that the counterpart would not come out ahead.
Well, I mean, and that's how, you know, these companies make a profit, right? Like, it's
Okay.
not a true profit sharing model, and it can never, like, just mathematically, right? You're never gonna have a continuous supply of people indefinitely. To
Unless you
sustain
work in
everyone.
consulting.
Well,
Unless
yeah.
you work in consulting,
Hey,
those college grads, they keep coming.
We provide a real value add.
I know we
a valuable
do.
product.
Exactly, right? That's why we're
Yeah.
still around.
But yeah, but no, I mean, it's a huge thing, right? Like these huge companies have formed off of this like weird multi-level marketing thing. I don't know if you guys know any people who have gotten into this, but you know, like when you see someone on Facebook that you might have known in high school and they're like, oh, buy this, like I'm like, ooh, I'm like affiliated with this company now and I'm selling this makeup kit or this knife set and you should buy it. Like I don't know if you've seen that. I've seen
Yeah, I
people
feel
I
I've
knew in
seen
high
like
school have done this.
that makeup example. I feel like I've seen on like TV
Yeah.
shows.
Yeah, right. It's
Not
like a
actual
thing.
live where it's like, oh hey, I got this. You know, they buy this product and then they're like, oh, you find your friends. You're like, oh hey, you should sell this, and also I can help you become a seller.
Yeah, that's
too.
exactly it. That's exactly it, right? And usually, you know, these people do it for a while and realize, wow, I'm actually losing money on this because I can't get any of my friends to sign up for it, and I have to pay to sell this product, which is ridiculous. And they stop.
Isn't
right?
that just like a franchising fee though? It's like if you opened up a McDonald's in like a really remote part of town that no one comes to, like you'd face the same problem, right? You have to pay the franchise fee, but you're not actually getting business. You're paying to sell Big Macs.
I guess, except McDonald's doesn't usually allow that, right? They like regulate the franchisees pretty heavily, and they make sure that the location of the restaurant It's like justifiable.
So it's like a
it's not-
well-run multi-level marketing scheme, is what you're
And,
telling
like,
me. It actually works.
McDonald's would only be a multi-level marketing scheme if the franchisees were expected to recruit additional franchisees, right?
But that's just a generalization, right? Like when n equals 3, right? Not n equals 2, right? It's the same principle.
No, it's not a pyramid. It's like a
A
plateau.
trapezoid is
I
just
don't
a
know.
flat
It's a trapezoid.
pyramid,
It's like literally a trapezoid with 2 levels. You have McDonald's corporate and the franchisees. So that's it.
Right, so it's just an abstraction, but the principle is the same, right? It's just that because they structured it in this specific way, it works, and no one's
Well,
complaining. but
it works because the portion of the pie that each person can get doesn't decrease linearly with time or with the expansion of the organization. Right? Like McDonald's isn't going out to franchisees and selling them a lie, right? Like each individual McDonald's can be a profitable business.
exactly. So
right.
so it's not the structure that's the problem. The problem is the ones that people complain about, they don't actually work. When it works, everyone's happy.
Yeah.
That's why they signed up in the
Oh
first
yeah, that's
place,
just
right?
when it works. It's just a business. But when it's
Yeah.
like a multi-level marketing thing, it's like this prospect of infinite growth, and it's all predicated right on bringing in additional people. Right.
That sounds like most of Silicon Valley today, infinite growth. That's all of what this is predicated on. It's like, when are you guys going to start making money? Oh, in the future. Let's grow the revenue base first.
Yeah, but a lot of that is venture capitalists like voluntarily being stupid.
Wow.
Like,
See,
you
this
make
is
an
where things
investment in
start
some
getting
shitty
interesting.
startup.
Right? Like to your point about white collar crime, this is the start piece when things start getting interesting, right? It's kind of like, if you can't tell that what's a multi-level marketing versus a legit business beforehand, and you can only tell afterwards once it's made it or broken, like I feel like it's a pretty like convenient distinction, right? It's just kind of like when you went out on a limb and it worked, you're like, oh, I was genius, entrepreneur, billionaire now. Right. But then if it didn't work, say, oh, these guys scammed me. Like it was never going to work to begin with. It was all bullshit. Right. Like,
yeah, I think the controversy with both Silicon Valley culture and multi-level marketing is that, at some point there's like you're treading the line of like lying to your investors. Right. And I mean, I guess there's like a legal question of like if I signed up to do a multi-level marketing thing, am I an investor? Like not really in the strict definition. I'm not putting capital in to grow the business.
But you're paying
becoming a salesman, a contracted salesman, right?
Yeah.
And it's like a transaction of goods, not like an investment. Right? But anyway, that's a separate question. There's like some hazy line of like lying to your investors, right? And that's what I was saying earlier about like we've abstracted, we've created the system where you use other people's money to do things, and that creates the like ambiguity around what is ethical and what isn't.
Yeah, because there can be a dispute oftentimes with white collar crime.
Like,
a lot of times,
like you could, an investment could fail, and the person who received the investment could be like, well, all of my modeling showed X and Y, and it was totally reasonable, and this is the risk that you take when you invest in something, right? And you can't blame me; it was out of my control. Right.
Yeah, exactly. So it's disputable. That I guess that's fundamentally the difference with white collar crime. Although, isn't a lot of violent crime also disputable? They just make that shit into TV shows. They don't do it as much for white collar crime.
Well, and it's the case of like
him who did the deed, or was it someone else? I mean, he was getting framed and like all this stuff.
Well, when it's the case of like
that's a little different though. That's like a matter of like who did it. Whereas with the white collar crime, the parties involved. It's just like, oh, who's, I don't know, I guess responsible.
Was there a crime?
Yeah, or was there even a crime? Whereas with the violent crime, you don't know all the parties involved.
There's a crime though.
There's a crime. Exactly.
That's a good way to sum it up.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good ending point. I need to go.
All right.
Perfect.
Yes. Great conversation.
Oh wait, I'm the one ending the recording. I just